Welcome to week 1 of the hips and the pelvis. Today we're going to start with pivot points. Pivot points are the contact points with the ground. If I want to target the hips and the pelvis, I can use a combination of two things. First thing is 2 pivot points, which is the feet. The outsides of the feet, the strong side of the feet. I'm going to shift weight to the outside. It's going to raise the heels up off the ground, and I'm going to load this crease from the 2nd to the 5th toe. That dual pivot point system is what most people primarily spend their time in. Some people are going to spend more time and get more benefit in 3 pivot points: my knee, my back foot, and my front foot. You can give them 4 pivot points, both feet, both knees, or 6 pivot points, both hands, both knees, both feet. So from the side view, when talking about the hips, we want the hips to be behind the sternum. The sternum is here. I never want the sternum even with the hip socket. That's going to create a push, which commonly can create compression in the low back. This spine has to float. That spine has to open, point back, think with your tail. You're going to push the tops of the feet into the floor, push the kneecaps into the floor, and push the hands into the floor. Rocking forward and back, controlling the hip socket, and keeping the knees under the hips is the neutral 6-point rock. Front view, 1, 2, 3, 4, tops of both feet, 5, 6, pushing the tops of the feet into the ground, opening the hips, keeping the chest tall, 6-point rockers. If I want to target someone who's very narrow in their assessment, then I might widen things out. Knees to the outside of the hips is going to be a wide base, more of a squat derivative. Challenging the hips to open and load with the butt back between the heels. Another form of this is to narrow everything up. This is going to target more of the front of the hip in this rocker versus the wide. It's going to target more of the back and the outside of the hip. I'll program these depending on what my client needs. If I want to make this easier for someone, a couple things I can do. First is the easiest: add pivot points. Hands. Hands to the ground, rocking forward and back. I can narrow things up. I can go neutral, and I can go wide. Those are your derivatives of your 6-point rockers. The progression is to go to a 4-point rocker and then to a 3-point. A 3-point is when I replace one knee with a foot. That foot is going to be in the column, so shoulder, hip, ankle, and I'm going to take the pelvis and turn it back and towards the back heel. So I'm loading into this side, lean into it, rock back. Other side, lean into it, rock back. So I'm taking the hips and the pelvis, I'm turning them and taking them backwards. Taking them backwards. My heel stays off the ground. My shin and my thigh point slightly out. That tells me that the hip has opened. And I'm going to rock. Keeping balance evenly between the foot, the knee, and the back foot. So 3 pivot points. If I want to turn, I can reach, I can challenge, I can integrate a calf raise. Calf raise. Okay? There's a lot we can do in 3 pivot points. 3 pivot points reduces the amount of weight and pressure that goes into this foot. So if I want to work an ankle sprain or a knee injury, then I want to put somebody in a 3 pivot point position before I integrate anything that's 2. When I walk and run, it's 1 pivot point at a time. So exercises with 1 pivot point are going to be more difficult than exercises with 2 pivot points, which would be more difficult than exercises with 3 pivot points, which would be more difficult than exercises with 4 pivot points, which are more difficult than exercises with 6 pivot points. However, we target the same tissues, no matter it's 6, 4, 3, or 2, and 1.